For the past 15 months, political violence has been a constant fact of American life. We've seen arsons and bombings, armed ambushes and assaults, sniper attacks and mass shootings, riots, and violent mobs on our city streets. We've seen assassinations, we've seen murder, we've seen death. None of this is random. It's organized, coordinated political terror. The people behind this violence are not common street criminals. They're not driven by money or drugs or gangland turf disputes. They're determined, militant extremists who wield violence for political ends. They know that their vision would never win at the ballot box, so they've chosen terrorism instead. They know their ideas could not win in the marketplace of ideas, so they shoot up the marketplace. Last year, President Trump survived not one, but 2 assassination attempts. In Butler, Pennsylvania, he escaped a sniper's bullet by a centimeter in a split second. Only weeks later, in West Palm Beach, another would-be assassin camped out for 12 hours in the brush outside of Trump International Golf Club, armed with a loaded rifle, burner phones, a GoPro, hoping to finish the job. Less than 2 months later, a healthcare CEO was gunned down in cold blood on a New York street by a left-wing extremist who called his victim a parasite who had it coming. Within days, left-wing activists had made the murderer a folk hero. In California, they pushed a ballot measure named in his honor. A poll taken 10 days after the murder found that nearly half of very liberal Americans had a favorable view of the killer, whereas just 8% of very conservative Americans felt the same. Then came an all-out war on immigration and customs enforcement. Across the country, federal officers were hunted like prey. They were attacked, surrounded, ambushed, and shot at. Their facilities were firebombed. There were arrests for arson, for assault, for violent threats and doxing, but the violence continued to escalate. On July 4th, 11 members of an Antifa terror cell carried out a coordinated ambush on an ICE facility in Texas. They arrived in 2 vehicles, loaded with semi-automatic rifles, handguns, Molotov cocktails, body armor, and encrypted radios. Their gear was painted with a circle A for Antifa. They detonated fireworks to lure officers out into the open and then opened fire and kept shooting until their guns jammed. One cop was struck in the neck and critically wounded while racing to respond. Just 3 weeks later, a transgender shooter entered a Catholic elementary school in Minneapolis and opened fire on hundreds of children while they prayed. Dozens were wounded. 2 little children, a 10-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy, were killed. The shooter marked his guns with slogans like, "Where is your God now?" and posted videos using an image of Christ for target practice. 2 weeks after that, Charlie Kirk was murdered while speaking to students in Utah. The killer told friends and family he did it because Charlie was full of hate. Social media exploded with gloating celebration. Thousands upon thousands of people, journalists, professors, and government employees could not contain their glee that a father of 2 young children had been gunned down in broad daylight. When Americans gathered to mourn him, they were attacked there too. In El Paso, an arsonist set fire to a church holding a vigil in his memory. A week later, a man opened fire into an ABC news station in Sacramento, just days after the network suspended Jimmy Kimmel's show. Police found anti-Trump writings in his car and a handwritten note that read, "Patel, Bongino, and Pam Bondi, they're next." And just last week, an anarchist radical was arrested for placing a $45,000 bounty on Pam Bondi, posting an image of the Attorney General with a sniper dot on her head. The caption read, "Wanted, dead or alive, preferably dead." A week after the ABC shooting, a sniper opened fire on an ICE facility in Dallas, killing multiple people. Investigators recovered shell casings etched with the words, "Anti-ICE." And this month, a man who flew across the country to murder Justice Brett Kavanaugh received a sentence of just 8 years. He brought a gun, ammunition, a knife, duct tape, and zip ties to kill a sitting Supreme Court justice. in his own home while his wife and kids were present because he didn't like the way he might rule on gun control or abortion. This is the nature of political violence in America today. It's driven by a system far larger than the people who commit the act itself. We've seen this system in action. We have not forgotten what happened in 2020. 5 years ago, violent mobs burned and looted their way through our cities. The press called the riots mostly peaceful, though. Ivy League academics celebrated them as righteous acts of resistance. The wealthy corporations in the world donated billions to keep them going. Vice presidential candidates bailed rioters out of jail. Prosecutors declined charges. Judges released arsonists and anarchists just hours after their arrests. The same public health experts who banned funerals and shut down churches declared mass protests justified because racism is a public health crisis. Politicians reserve their outrage not for criminals torching police precincts, but for the officers trying to defend them. The largest cities in the nation slashed their police budgets by hundreds of millions of dollars, unleashing a deadly wave of violent crime on a scale not seen in decades, the largest single-year increase in murders in more than a century. The activists on the ground claimed to be revolutionaries fighting the powers that be. But the truth is, they were backed by the full force of the ruling regime. The mobs that torch cities, the radicals who ambush ICE agents, the activists who terrorize judges at their homes, all of them are foot soldiers in the same regime. A regime whose foundational ideology is that we're born either as victims or oppressors, and is the duty of revolutionaries to impose their vision of equity upon us all. This sustained campaign of violence is explicitly and specifically political. It is motivated by a distinct and fanatical ideology, rabidly anti-American, anti-Western, and anti-civilization itself. It is a worldview that indicts the United States as an illegitimate nation born in evil. By now, most Americans have heard this language. It has dominated our public life for years. These are not fringe ideas any longer. They have not just been tolerated, but actively embraced, repeated, and amplified through the largest megaphones in our country. To my friends on the other side of the dais who may take offense with these categorizations, how often have we heard Democrats praise these radicals for their idealism? How many elected officials have called riots the language of the unheard? The violence stalking our streets today is a feature, not a bug. There is an evil but consistent logic to it. It's the natural and logical result of the ideology itself. If the violent elements' ideals were so praiseworthy, then the system which obstructs their fulfillment is to blame. And why work within a blameworthy system for praiseworthy ends? To these people and this movement, the only acceptable goal is the destruction of the system and its leaders. The central idea of every revolutionary project is that utopia must be achieved through any means necessary. If you truly believe that Charlie Kirk is an existential threat to your safety, and you've bought into the nonsense that words are violence, then silencing him by any means could seem necessary. If you believe that mass migration is an inalienable right, then opening the floodgates to uncontrolled immigration, tearing down the border and attacking those who defend it might look like justice to you. If you believe that America was conceived in murder and built on stolen land, then you feel no moral obligation to respect and obey its laws. If you truly believe the police are the armed enforcers of racist oppression who indiscriminately murder innocent victims in the streets, then you might see violence against an officer as an act of brave resistance. When Charlie Kirk was murdered, one of his killer's bullets was engraved with the message, "Hey fascist, catch." But who taught him that Charlie Kirk was a fascist? Who convinced him, I should say, that Charlie's hate made his murder a righteous act? Who told him over and over again that people who believe what Charlie Kirk believed are threats to our democracy? He didn't invent that worldview. He learned it, as did each and every one of the arsonists, assassins, and militants who came before him. Perhaps the people in power who said these things didn't really believe them, but clearly some of the people who listened to them did. And now they are taking those ideas to their final logical conclusion. Enough. We are faced with only two paths. Either we confront this political violence and end it, or it will end us.